What's up, everybody? Nick Whalen here from RotoWire, talking some fantasy basketball. I'm excited for this one. We got a fun one this week. Going to take a look back, kind of rewind back to draft season, look at some ADPs, look at some current values, and talk about the best value picks in 2024-25 fantasy drafts. So at this juncture, the average NBA team has played 33 games. That means we're 40% of the way through the NBA regular season. So enough of a sample here that I think we can talk about a lot of this in a concrete nature. Like I said, we're going to take a look back at some of the best value picks you could have made based on ADP versus current value. We're using the player ratings page, which you can find over at rotowire.com, rotowire.com/try, by the way, for free access to everything on our site. These ratings are tailored to 8 category leagues. So there will be some discrepancies depending on your league settings. Maybe you include turnovers, maybe you're in a points league, but you get the gist. Overall, it's a pretty good gauge for where players rate so far this season. So we're going to run through a handful of guys who've blown past their ADPs. Hopefully you drafted at least a few of them, but if you didn't, we're going to lay out why you certainly wish you probably did. All right, so we're going to start with the big risers, guys who were taken on average outside of the top 100 and are now comfortably inside that range. We got to start with Dyson Daniels down in Atlanta. ADP of 141 coming into the year. He currently rates as the 30th best player in 8-cat leagues. So we're talking about a difference of over 110 picks. One of the better draft day values in recent years, if we're being honest. I mean, Daniels is not only having the best offensive season of his career and, playing 34 minutes a game certainly helps, but the defensive value has been off the charts. It doesn't matter if you're shooting 60% at the free throw line or 31% from three. When you're giving fantasy managers 3.1 steals per game and close to a block per game on top of that. I mean, what Daniels is doing in terms of steals is truly historic. No one has averaged more than 3 steals per game since John Stockton back in 1988-89. And Daniels sitting at 3.1 right now. His 93 total steals through 30 games, obviously number one in the NBA, but he's number one by 29 steals over Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who has 64 steals in 32 games. I mean, Dyson Daniels is lapping the field in terms of the value provided in that single category. I mean, if you're in a cat league and you have Dyson Daniels, you're basically a lock to win steals. All right, next up, Chris Paul of the San Antonio Spurs. ADP of 120. He's currently a top 35 player, 34th overall, so a difference of 86 picks. This is not one that I saw coming, but Chris Paul has yet to miss a game, which certainly helps. He started all 33 so far for the Spurs. He's still giving you over 8 assists per game, 1.5 steals, 1.7 threes, shooting 98% at the free throw line. He's 49 of 50 at the charity stripe this season. The assists, the steals, they're carrying almost all the weight here, but CP3 is doing just enough in the other categories to make him a top 40 guy so far. Cam Johnson of the Brooklyn Nets, at least for now, ADP of 117. He is currently the 33rd overall player. It feels like Johnson's breakout has been buried a bit because he's on the Brooklyn Nets, but after a couple up and down seasons in Phoenix and even last year in Brooklyn, he has really come into his own. 19 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, almost 1.5 steals and blocks. And most importantly, 3.2 threes per game at a 43% clip. So even though well over half of his field goal attempts have come from three, it's not killing the field goal percentage at all. Still shooting 49% from the field, 89% at the line on 4 attempts. That's more than enough to make a difference. I do worry about Johnson getting traded to what would almost certainly be a worse situation, but hopefully you've been able to cash in on this excellent first half so far. All right, I'm surprised it took this long to get to Peyton Pritchard of the Boston Celtics. ADP of 149. He is currently the 47th overall player. I don't even know what to say here. We knew Pritchard could play. We knew he was a good player. He's turned into one of the best and most efficient 6 men in recent memory. I mean, there's a reason he's minus 225 right now at DraftKings to take home the 6 Man of the Year award. Pritchard's up to 16 points, 4 rebounds, 3.5 assists per game. He's giving you a steal per game on top of that. But much like Cam Johnson, so much of the value is tethered to the high volume 3-point shooting. 3.7 makes per game on 42.5% shooting. 5th in the NBA in total made threes. He's got more makes than Jason Tatum, more than Stephen Curry. He's only 7 makes behind Anthony Edwards for the NBA lead right now. And he's doing it all in 28 minutes per game without starting a single game so far this year. All right, we got to talk about Norm Powell out in LA. ADP of 127. He's currently the 57th overall player in 8-cat total value. And I'm hesitant to call this a true breakout season because Powell's been a really good player for a long time, but talk about having a career year at age 31, something you don't see very often. We knew Powell would step into a larger role with Paul George in Philly, Kawhi on the shelf, but I think he's exceeded even his biggest supporters' expectations. I mean, over 24 points per game on 49, 45, 85 shooting. Now, Powell's three-point shooting will likely regress at some point. I mean, 45%, that's close to league leading, but he shot over 43% from deep last season. He has 4 other seasons in his career where he shot in the 40s, so it's not really all that out of character. But for a guy who spent much of his career in a bench role or a supporting role, he's finally shown what he's capable of when essentially being asked to be the number one option for this Clippers team. Also giving you 1.3 steals, by the way, a career best. And unfortunately, he doesn't really offer anything in terms of rebounds or assists, or he'd rank even higher on the ACAT rank. All right, to finish out the post-top 100 guys, Goga Bitadze. His ADP is 137, according to our ADP page on RotoWire. I don't really think that's accurate because he wasn't even drafted in a lot of leagues. So, if he was essentially the final pick. But he's been an excellent fill-in for the Magic. Wasn't even in the rotation, really, to begin the season. But Wendell Carter, of course, had his usual injury issues. Banchero and both Wagner's going out has certainly helped. But Bitadze has really established himself as, in my mind, easily the best big man on this roster. Certainly ahead of Wendell Carter. He's not a high-volume guy offensively. Gives you about 10 points per game, but over 8 rebounds, over 2 assists, 1.6 blocks, almost a full steal per game as well. He's also shooting 64% from the field, by far a career best, up to 73% at the free throw line. So not really harming you much there either. Again, that ADP figure of 137, probably not really reminiscent of just how much his value has improved this season. So yeah, maybe you picked him up a couple weeks into the season off the waiver wire, and all of a sudden you got yourself a top 70 guy who you're comfortable starting just about every week. All right, before we get to the rest of the list, if you're enjoying this video or any of our videos on RotoWire, please make sure you give it a like. Please make sure you're subscribed as well to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball channel. That's where you can find all of our videos. You can find all of our podcasts, live and archived. RotoWire Fantasy Basketball. Just hit that little subscribe button right there. All right, so part 2 here. I now want to focus on some of the bigger names, guys who went inside the top 100 and have still dramatically improved their value this season. We'll start with Jalen Johnson, ADP of 38. He is currently a round 1 value, 11th overall in total ACAT value. So we're talking a difference of more than 2 rounds. He had his year 3 breakout last season, has only added to it now this year, up to 20 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.1 blocks per game on the year, 51% from the field, 1.4 threes per game as well. Free throw shooting remains a little bit shaky at 75%. That would be the knock on him, but he's really become one of the most well-rounded players in the NBA. One of only 4 players this season averaging at least 20, 10, and 5. Giannis, Domantas Sabonis, and Nikola Jokic being the other 3. Out in Chicago, we got Nikola Vucevic with an ADP of 43. He is also currently a first-round value, 12th overall, so a difference of almost 3 rounds. And for as great as Jalen Johnson has been, Vucevic has exceeded his ADP by even more. And for the most part, it's been a weird season because it's kind of business as usual in terms of the counting stats. 20 points, 10 boards, 3 assists. Not really far off from what Vucevic has put up for the last decade, essentially, but he's shooting 56% from the field, by far a career high, 83% at the line, and 44% from beyond the arc. And, we talked about this like a month ago, and you're thinking at some point that 3-point shooting is going to slow down. It has not. He's taken 4.8 threes per game. He's making over 2 per game. This is a guy who shot 29% from 3 last season, 29%, and he's up to 44% this year. I do still think some regression is coming at some point. He's a candidate to be traded, but if you did take Vucevic in round 4, you've basically returned first-round value so far in cat leagues. All right, got a few guards that we want to hit here as well. Darius Garland for the Cleveland Cavaliers, ADP in the mid-60s, current value sitting at 20th overall. So like Vucevic, numbers-wise, Garland isn't really doing anything all that crazy. 20.5 points, just about 7 assists, 2.5 rebounds, 1.2 steals. I mean, that's about what he's given you over the last few years, but he has also taken a huge jump in efficiency. 49% from the field, 43% from 3, 91% at the line on over 3 attempts per game. He's also upped his 3-point attempt rate. He's taken a career high 6.9 threes per game, hitting almost 3 of those. Garland is in elite company right now as far as players averaging at least 20 points and 6 assists to go with 2.5 made threes. Only 9 players are doing that so far this season. He has the highest true shooting percentage of any of those guys. Another big-time riser in the Eastern Conference, Tyler Hero of the Miami Heat. ADP in the early 70s, about 71 on average. Currently a late second, early third round value, comes in at 26 overall. Admittedly, Hero's ADP felt a bit low coming into the year, but He did miss half of last season, had some injury concerns, had some up and down stretches, even when healthy last year. He is having easily the best season of his career. Truly feels like he is now the unquestioned number one option down in Miami. Up to 24 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 made threes per game. That's up from 3.1 last season. He ranks behind only Stephen Curry in threes per game made this season. He's 11th in the NBA in total points scored, and he's doing it all efficiently, shooting 48% from the field, 85% at the line, 41% from beyond the arc. Tyler Hero absolutely should be an Eastern Conference All-Star next month. All right, we'll finish out with Jalen Suggs of the Orlando Magic. ADP of 119. He is currently the 28th overall player, so a difference of 91 spots. Massive leap for Jalen Suggs, partially, of course, due to injuries to Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, but Suggs has become a much more consistent offensive player. I didn't know if he had this in him, but he certainly does. He's up almost 5 points per game compared to last year. He's adding more playmaking, more rebounding, still a great defender, giving you 1.5 steals, 1 block per game. Excellent shot blocker for a player of his size. Now, the shooting efficiency is actually what's hurting him, contrary to most players on this list. He's actually taken a big step back as a three-point shooter, 31% on the year after shooting nearly 40% a year ago. He's taken over 7 per game, so it is kind of killing his field goal percentage, but nonetheless, he's offset that in some ways by being a 91% free throw shooter. He sat around 75% his first 3 years in the NBA, so that has been a massive, massive improvement to his fantasy value. Again, a top 30 player on the year, Jalen Suggs.